Introduced in Volume 6, the Apathy was the first creature of Grimm that didn't present a physical threat. It was more than just looks and how big its bite was. This Grimm was unique. To quickly explain the Grimm, the Apathy do exactly as it sounds. Apathy by its own definition is a lack of interest, enthusiasm, or concern. There's no emotion, no passion, no excitement. You're basically sedated. These Grimm do exactly that. They don't attack you as a Beowulf or a Nevermore would, but by merely being in their presence, that feeling of apathy weighs you down without you even knowing. First, you become calm and tired, but over time, you don't do anything. You don't get out of your bed, you just don't eat, you're just too tired to live, and so you just lie there until you die. But some of you, I'm sure, would love to know how these Grimm were created and the inspiration for how they came to be. Well, on December 8th, once the episode went public for everyone to see, Miles made a Twitter thread telling us all what inspired them. I'll link to his Twitter thread in the comments and the description so you can take a look for yourself if you're interested. According to him, these Grimm were actually created or conceptualized very early in the show's history. 3 things contributed to the Apathy's creation. First was the look. Before Volume 1, Miles, Monty, and Carrie were spitballing ideas for monsters. Miles himself was more interested in something, as he described, frail. He came across this picture of a particularly interesting scarecrow. As he said, it can't move, it can't do anything, but it's just disturbing. And thus, this was the inspiration for how the Apathy would look. But how about the story? Brunswick Farms? Bartleby? Well, when Miles was in college, he read a story titled Bartleby the Scrivener. Let me condense the plot. The story is told from the perspective of an unnamed lawyer with his own business. He hires 2 scriveners. Those are people who can read and write and wrote letters to courts, to copy legal documents. Because of the increase in business, he hires a 3rd man named Bartleby, who, as described, looks forlorn, unhappy, sad, miserable. At first, Bartleby does amazing at his job, providing high-quality work. But one day, when asked to proofread a document, he responds with, "I would prefer not to," a line that would become ever too familiar. Over time, Bartleby performs less and less of his job, until eventually he isn't doing his job at all, as he would prefer not to. He eventually starts living there, preferring not to go home. And when the narrator moves his business elsewhere, Bartleby stays. New tenants remove Bartleby, but now all he does is sit on the stairs and sleep in the doorway. The narrator keeps checking on him and even invites him to live with him, but Bartleby once again says, "I would prefer not to." Eventually, Bartleby ends up getting forcibly removed and arrested. The narrator bribes the officer to make sure he gets enough food, but upon his next return, he comes to learn that Bartleby died of starvation, simply having preferred not to eat. He was so apathetic that he just died. And that's where the inspiration for Bartleby, who ran Brunswick Farms, came from. But that story also spawned the characters saying, "I'm tired." It's this story's version of, "I would prefer not to."
I don't know. I'm just tired.
I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just really tired and I'm so tired.
I am really tired.
I'll do it tomorrow and tell her the truth once these things take the edge off of everyone. I'm tired.
Adding on to the story of Bartleby, something else that influenced the Apathy in Brunswick Farms was a 2005 film called Serenity, a movie continuing from the show Firefly. Now, spoilers for this movie if you have not seen it. The monsters in this movie are known as Reavers. These are animalistic humans who rape, torture, and cannibalize others. In the movie, you learn how these monsters were created. Government scientists were using a planet known as Miranda as a testing ground for a chemical. This chemical was added to the planet's air processors to calm the population down and make everyone less aggressive. This chemical worked, but it worked too well. Of the planet's 30 million residents, 99.9% of them became so apathetic that they just stopped going to work. They stopped talking, they stopped eating, then they stopped moving. They just laid down where they were and allowed themselves to die.
It was supposed to calm the population, weed out aggression. Well, it works. The people here stopped fighting. And then they stopped everything else. They stopped going to work. They stopped breeding, talking, eating. There's 30 million people here and they all just let themselves die.
The remaining 0.1% had the opposite effect and they became the hyper-violent monsters known as Reavers. It was that backstory that stuck with Miles and, in combination with Bartleby, created the Apathy. As stated previously, their creation was much earlier than their debut. The concept alone was deemed too strong for our protagonists to face in the early days of the show, and so they waited for the fall of Beacon to occur. Then the characters would be traveling across the land and encountering more dangerous Grimm. But Miles acknowledges the difficulty they had at trying to balance all the stories occurring at separate times. So, the Apathy continued to be pushed. Volume 6, however, provided the perfect time to bring them in. Team Ruby was back together, Ozpin's secrets began to pour out, their spirits were already breaking, and the Apathy was just the cherry on top. Something interesting about the Apathy is how Miles states that an original concept for these Grimm would be them affecting other Grimm as well. This is part of the concept of the Apathy, and we didn't see any other Grimm in the area to know whether or not they do have an effect on other Grimm. But this was just a very interesting idea that was important to pull out of his tweets as well. To end the video, I'll just read what Miles wrote because it perfectly summarizes these Grimm's creation. I wanted to create an enemy that would pose a very serious threat to our heroes, not just physically, but to who they are and what they stand for. In my mind, the good guys fight for peace, justice, and love. A lot of people would describe the opposite of love as hate, but I disagree. Love is the most powerful, extreme emotion that a person can feel. The opposite of that is nothing. The opposite of love is apathy. And apathy to me is the scariest thing in the world.